Σε αυτό το σημείο θα ήθελα, είναι πολύ μεγάλη μας χαρά και τιμή που ο πρόεδρος του Ναυτικού Επιμελητηρίου είναι μαζί μας και θα ήθελα να προσκαλέσω τον Γιώργο Πατέρα να απευθύνει χαιρετισμό αλλά και την ομιλία του Scrub or not to Scrub. Γιώργο, σε ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ για την τιμή.
Αγαπητοί εκπρόσωποι των τοπικών διοικητικών και στρατιωτικών αρχών, κυρία Κοσμήτωρα, κύριοι διευθυντές σπουδών Πανεπιστημίου και ΑΕΝ, κύριοι οργανωτές του NAVIGATOR FORUM, εκπρόσωποι ναυτιλιακών εταιριών, representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, αγαπητέ μαθητές και μαθήτριες στο μέλλον της εμπορικής ναυτιλίας, κυρίες και κύριοι, καλημέρα σας. Εκ μέρους του Ναυτικού Επιμελητηρίου της Ελλάδος θέλω να σας ευχαριστήσω που ήρθετε εδώ στην πανέμορφη Χίο. Όταν ξυπνάτε το πρωί να βλέπετε προς τα βόρεια, θα βλέπετε την Αιγνούσα και θα παίρνετε μεγάλη χαρά. Δεν μπορούσαμε να πάρουμε βίζα για όλους σας, γι' αυτό γίνεται στη Χίο και όχι στην Αιγνούσα, το καταλαβαίνετε αυτό. Λοιπόν, εγώ θα σας μιλήσω to scrub or not to scrub, στα αγγλικά, μια σύντομη ομιλία, λίγο τεχνική, για το μέλλον που μας επηρεάζει όλους και είναι, πιστεύω, ένα από τα πιο σοβαρά θέματα που έχουμε σήμερα στην εμπορική ναυτιλία. To scrub or not to scrub. That is a commercial decision, not an environmental solution. I fear this debate must be concluded this year, as time is running out. We need to look at this pressing question of low sulfur fuel holistically. Otherwise, will we be drawn into the commercial interests of the players rather than addressing the real problem, that is, the preservation of the environment for the future. The IMO Regulation 14 is clear. MEPC 176/58, adopted 10/10/08 for those who are interested. I'll just read paragraph 3. 0.05 mass on mass sulfur in the fuel after January 2020. Γι' αυτό ακούτε όλοι 2020 και νομίζουμε όλοι τι είναι το 2020. And of course, if operating within an ECA area, 0.1% after the 1st of January 15. In other words, gas oil. Also, Annex 6, Chapter 1, MARPOL 73/78, Regulation 4, equivalence. It's equally clear. I won't read the whole thing, but just the last paragraph 4. The administration of a party which allows the use of an equivalent as set forth in paragraph 1 of this regulation shall endeavor not to impair or damage its environment, human health, protect property or resources or those of another state. What does this actually mean? Not the letter of the law, but the spirit of the regulation. It means limiting sulfur pollution into the environment. Reduce sulfur from 3.5% to 0.5%. It's that simple. In my mind, it doesn't say take sulfur out of the gaseous emissions and put it into a liquid emission. Let's talk a little bit about combustion. I won't get too technical, but I think it's very important for you to understand. If we burn a carbon-based fuel, hydrocarbon-based benzene ring, you will get three main byproducts of combustion: carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and black carbon. Carbon monoxide is poisonous, so it's bad. You'll be fined if black carbon is seen belching from your funnel, so that's also bad. So all we're left with is CO2, carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. That's also bad. You all understand that we have the same problems with burning LNG. LNG, όλοι λέμε, η λύση του προβλήματος είναι το LNG. But LNG is 85% methane, CH4, which has the added problem of methane slippage. Methane is 24 times more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. But of course, methane burns much more efficiently than long-chain hydrocarbons in fossil fuels. Going back to combustion. We don't want CO, carbon monoxide, because it's poisonous. So we add more oxygen to create CO2, as opposed to carbon monoxide. The only way to do this is by adding more oxygen. Practically, we add more air, above the stoichiometric required quantity. But, a big but. This also increases dramatically nitrous oxides, because air is 78% nitrogen and only 21% oxygen, creating the well-known tier 3 problem. that's coming down the road in the next few years. So we knowingly create more CO2 and nitrous oxide in combustion to prevent the production of carbon monoxide, which is poisonous, and aesthetically displeasing black carbon. Personally, and from the literature I've read, black carbon may be more of a culprit of melting the ice caps than the alleged global warming. Black carbon reacts rather like salt on ice and lowers its melting point. So the ice melts where the black carbon settles, and weak spots and stress concentration does the rest. But this is not news to any of you. This is familiar ground and not controversial. We all know the concept of alternative energy sources. It's been seriously around for more than 70 years. In fact, my uncle built a crude but fairly efficient solar panel in Vrondados in the 60s. It worked without any problems for almost 50 years. So why have we taken so long to take this serious look at pollution from combustion of carbon-based fuels? We've known about this problem for decades. I think it's time now to talk a little bit about sulfur, a naturally occurring element found in volcanoes, in volcano lava, and fossil fuels, given to us by God, the Almighty. And it cannot be destroyed by combustion. It appears in many forms: sulfur, the solid, with a molecular weight of 32, or sulfur dioxide, created after combustion, or sulfuric acid, H2SO4, or acid rain. Once the combustion, sulfate dissolves in water. The oxygen atom has a molecular weight of 16. There are two of them, so it's 32. Thus, the sulfate of sulfur are heavier than sulfur itself. Sulfur, we said, was 32. Sulfur dioxide, therefore, 64. And sulfuric acid, 96 molecular weight. That's why the weight of sulfur after combustion and reaction with the atmosphere is 3 times heavier than the sulfur actually in the fuel. That's something that many people are confused about. Sulfur is actually useful for engines as it acts as a lubricant, lubricating primary and secondary reciprocating parts within the engine fuel system. The removal of sulfur from the fuel will require an engine redesign or the use of a lubricity additive, a minor problem in the global picture. So let's remove the sulfur. It's bad. It causes acid rain and other unpleasant side effects. But of course, nothing grows without sulfur. This has created quite a nice niche market, buying sulfur from the refineries for the farmers to put onto the land. I'm all for new trade. So what are the logical solutions? Either remove the sulfur at source, in other words, from the fuel prior to combustion, something that should be done at the refinery, or clean the exhaust gas by use of scrubbers. We can actually use the hydrated lime used in scrubbers to scrub CO2 and create calcium and water, both inert, but we don't. But sulfur scrubbers don't create an inert lime, since they create sulfur and sulfates and sulfuric acid slurries, none of which are inert or environmentally friendly. In the open loop scrubber, we dump that slurry at sea. In the closed loop, this is retained on board. The big question is, how much of what are we dumping or storing on board? I won't go into the influences of, or the inefficiencies or complications of the working of a scrubber, but the open loop uses seawater to remove the sulfur dioxide, SO2, from the combustion by dissolving it in abundant supplies of seawater, cheap and freely available, and creating a sulfate, sulfuric acid, commonly known as in H2SO4, commonly known as sulfuric acid, which is then dumped into the sea, corroding all the pipework on its way into the sea. So this is the same amount of sulfur dumped into the sea as would have been exhausted into the atmosphere, approximately 1,750 kilos per day, or 6 kilos per mile, assuming 3.5% sulfur fuel on 50-ton combustion at 12 knots. I'll repeat that, 1,750 kila την ημέρα. So what have we done? We just bypassed the acid rain stage without the benefits of the cooling effect of aerosolized sulfur in the air, the effects of which admittedly only last for 6 months, and just redirected our emissions from the air directly into the sea. According to Dr. Gratsos, recent research, global warming is directly affected by the removal of aerosolized sulfur from the air. On the other hand, closed-loop scrubbers use lime, calcium hydroxide, and some small quantities of fresh water, creating a calcium sulfate slurry, plaster of Paris, which has to be stored on board. 50 metric tons of fuel consumption equates to about 5 metric tons of slurry per day, or about 150 tons on a 30-day trip to the Far East. A part of the pH-cured slurry is also actually dumped overboard in most closed-loop and hybrid scrubber designs. This is the bleed-off of the circulating scrubber solution. But no one wants to take this retained sulfur slurry ashore. Problems, problems, problems. Ports should be forced to provide reception facilities. An odd question has arisen by advocates of the scrubber. What's the problem of dumping sulfuric acid into the sea? It's only about 1,750 kilos per day, per ship. 2,000 scrubbers approximately have been fitted to date. So that's only about 3,500 tons a day. Or if we actually fit 60,000 scrubbers, we would be dumping about 105,000 tons of sulfur a day, or about 30 million tons of sulfur a year. Doesn't really sound like much of an environmental solution, if you look at it that way. 105 tons of sulfur dumped into the sea a year. Doesn't look right to me. So how much sulfur is actually in the sea before we start dumping it from our scrubbers? The reply from scrubber manufacturers is 7%. That's 70 kilos per cubic meter. So what we intend to dump is a fraction of what already exists. Or is it? Actually, it's 7% sulfate of SO4 in the chemical solid makeup of seawater, which is only 0.25%. The rest of it is freshwater, H2O. We're all shipping people. We know that freshwater is 1,000 and seawater is 1,025. So how can you have 7% sulfur? It's a little lie, but they say it's 7% of sulfur. Then when you catch them out, they say that it's 7% of 3.5%, but 3.5% is only in the Dead Sea. There are lots of little clever. It's actually 0.016%, and we're dumping a lot more than that into the sea. So let's go back to the regulation of the IMO. No sulfur above 0.5%. So why are we even contemplating scrubbers as opposed to forcing the oil companies to remove it at source? I think the answer is in the question. The oil majors, in all their wisdom, have decided to pass the expense onto the ship owner and are obliging them to install scrubbers with a promise of lucrative charters. But the market is a powerful force, more powerful than the oil major lobby, which result in the narrowing of the price differential between low and high sulfur fuel. There are no more than about 2,000 scrubber fitted. So sooner rather than later, the supply and demand of the two fuels will balance out, and the low sulfur straight run fuel will be cheaper than the 3.5% sulfur fuel, making the scrubbers redundant. But in the meantime, we have another major operational problem. There is no ISO standard yet available for low sulfur blended fuel. This has a greater problem. The size of this problem should require a push for an immediate and urgent solution. Thankfully, at the intersessional IMO meetings, and I point to the Marshall Islands because they were the people who forced this into the, well, assisted in getting this into the IMO, that the IMO is meeting, that thankfully, at the intersessional IMO meetings, the dangers of blended fuel was discussed. Instability and incompatibility will create dangerous operational problems. Instability will cause asphaltenes to drop out of solution, and incompatibility of blends will cause the diluting agent, the lighter distillate, not to mix. Suction from tanks will be impaired, and combustion will be abruptly stopped. So the intransigence of the oil companies not to address the problem in a timely manner will cause untold problems. They are forcing the new building VSCC owners to fit scrubbers that just redirect the pollution directly into the sea, or they are producing an unsatisfactory or unsafe low sulfur fuel blend. both totally unsatisfactory solutions. It's obvious that the use of scrubbers is only a temporary stopgap solution. Eventually, the fuels containing sulfur will have to be stripped of sulfur before use. But the problems continue. Australia has suggested that they intend to ban open-loop scrubbers in territorial waters. The EU will obviously follow suit for its non-ECA coastline. Eventually, everyone will realize the pollution effects of the open-loop scrubber and ban them everywhere, except the open sea. So either you fit a closed-loop or hybrid scrubber, or you have a dual-fuel capacity. So all we will do is kill the marine life along the designated ocean routes by dumping concentrated doses of sulfuric acid. I don't think this was the spirit of Regulation 14 when it was conceived, written, or enacted. In conclusion, I believe that the only viable solution for the oil companies is to produce low sulfur 0.5% straight run heavy fuel oil, and let's go about our business and resolve the environmental issues affecting our planet. Because so far, we're just exasperating the global warming issue with our inconceived concepts of clean air. Quite frankly, and to quote a respected friend, we are trying to re-engineer the planet and failing miserably. Thank you very much. Sorry. Grazie Liga.
That's a small vessel to keep remembering the HEOS first forum. Thank you very much for being here. Και το ναυτικό επιμελητήριο.